So, Dan, when we're talking about NVIDIA in particular, the fact that this isn't a news story, but it seems like the crackdown on NVIDIA chips is intensifying. What does this mean for the stock and its revenues out of China?
Look, I mean, this is a shot across the bow, not just NVIDIA, but ultimately, U.S. tech. Look, and we've seen it, but you're talking about what could be 15, 20 billion per year for NVIDIA. Look, I think the bark ultimately could be worse than the bite here, but it speaks to the continued tensions we're going to see in China, and especially when it comes to NVIDIA. Look, that's the golden goose. They're continuing to go after the China market, and China big tech wants those NVIDIA chips over Huawei.
All right, Dan, we were just showing the broader chip sector, Chinese chips, and some other things just a short time ago. What does this mean for the broader chip sector? I'm thinking about AMD in particular that also has a significant China business. Does this signal just a broader pressure on chips?
Look, I think it just signals that you're going to have more and more tensions. And the reality is that when it comes to NVIDIA, when it comes to AMD, they want continued access to the China market. On the other hand, Beijing, they want domestic, right? In terms of Huawei, that's what they want, Baba and everyone to use. The reality is one chip in the world fueling the AI revolution. And that's NVIDIA.
Right.
Well, Jensen will tell you.
Where is OpenAI going to come up with all this money?
Jensen will tell you that given where he's going to be coming in at that $100 billion,
yes,
he thinks he's going to crush it.
I know he does.
He thinks he's going to crush it. I bet you secretly, there's probably a $2 trillion number out there, but I think $1 trillion, $1.25 trillion, not a problem.
Right. Well, we should put it in perspective. OpenAI, as a private company, is currently the employees have sold stock most recently at about $500 billion.
Right.
Value. That is, again, private market value. So you're not seeing the stock trade to get an accurate read. But that said, why does he believe this is going to be a trillion or more company?
Well, I think that he just, first of all, he loves Sam Altman. Sam Altman started everything. Second, he thinks the product rollouts are all going to be fantastic. Now, we've already had, look, Carl was talking the other day about Sora. Well,
Sora too, yeah.
That is, the downloads there will be significant. So what Jensen is saying is, when I ask him about it, he goes, Jim, when you see the revenues, the revenues are going to blow you away. And if the revenues blow you away, we're going to get more than those people got, the insiders who sold. They must have bought like beachfront property or something.
They must have, but and Sora 2 is well, you can see it right there. That said, it also could, again, I can't help but focus on the societal impact of AI and what it's going to mean, and the fact that everybody's going to be able to create videos that are not real, and yet how many people are going to believe they are, and what is that going to look like, and what is the truth going to ultimately be? But it's going to use a lot of compute and a lot of power. So there you go. I did. Yesterday we actually mentioned it. Yeah, the amount of compute used for Sora is what? How many times is it? Video generation. 3,000 times what it is for a single shot chat bot.
There was an item on the wire yesterday that Microsoft is struggling for cloud capacity and that customers are turning away from Azure because they don't have enough. At the same time, they pulled the plug on this data center in Wisconsin because of local pushback.
I know, but we got this secret data center being developed in North Dakota that no one even knows the name of who's doing it. Really? It's like Area 51, this thing in North Dakota. It's my best people.
Look at all the old Bitcoin miners. Applied Digital today, it's like a $7+ billion company.
You're going in trader, aren't you?
Well, no, it's going to be up sharply.
Right.
APLD.
We don't know. They got a good deal.
And because they have, and again, the reason is the Bitcoin miners of old who now are, basically they have power in place. They have contracts to actually take power, and that is of a value, Carl, that is hard to put a number on at this point. Oh, you have power? We want it.
Mac, our coverage earlier in the week really centered around Jensen Huang coming on Squawk, talking to Jim in the investing club. And Huang has been so vocal about almost an apostle, like trying to convince lawmakers here that we need to make sure China's basing their technology on U.S. architecture. He's run afoul of some lawmakers who didn't like the fact that he said, being a China hawk is not patriotic. I wonder if this presidential post today and an acceleration of the trade war, what that does to Huang's argument.
Yeah, and I mean, Jensen Huang has absolutely become a tech ambassador of sorts. He was with President Trump in the UK as part of a whole host of announcements there related to the AI narrative and an acquisition talk as well with Nscale. But the key point here is that so much of their business model is reliant on those China sales, and so we've got earnings coming up, or we're going to see what kind of impact that had. But every analyst on the street is trying to model for what this does to NVIDIA's math, absent being able to make those exports. So whether or not President Trump ultimately calls off these talks is still a standing question per Eamon's reporting earlier in the hour. But it's going to be key that NVIDIA gets to reopen that supply chain. And that is highly dependent on where President Trump lands on this. And at this point, it does seem to be a very key negotiating chip. And that's the point here. These chip makers are becoming negotiating chips in this wider trade war between the two countries.
Even with the pullback, we can look at NVIDIA. We're not that far away for $5 trillion in market cap. Now, this bit of upset is obviously front and center for us as we come on the air for you. So we're at 189. We need 205. So, maybe we get that in earnings. Maybe we don't. But that's been one of the stories there. There's Morgan Stanley positive on that name. AMD's best week since 2016. You've got the Qualcomm news that Mackenzie Sigalos was talking about earlier, where China opening this antitrust probe there. So there's just a lot of tension bubbling back over the surface as we see today.
For a while, you could just say AI on your conference call and your stock got a bit higher. It seems like we understand it perhaps a little bit more now. Still, valuation's still pretty high. NVIDIA close to $5 trillion. Is there still room to run in these names? And if you're an investor that isn't in, wants to get in, how careful do you have to be in stock selection? Or if you're in AI and at least you're headed the right direction, you're going to be okay?
Yeah, I think the reality is it is still early in AI. There are plenty of external factors that could disrupt things. But you mentioned valuations. If I look at where NVIDIA is trading, for instance, at sort of high 20s, low 30s multiple, for the growth rates that they're putting up and for how important they are to the global compute ecosystem, I actually don't think it's all that expensive. I think it's fairly valued and on next year's and 2 years out earnings, and those earnings numbers are going to move meaningfully higher. If we step back and think about the AI space, the number of users is going up, the complexity of the applications and workloads is going up, and the number of applications we're using AI is going up, all three at the same time. I actually think the demand for compute and the gap between supply and demand of where we are today has actually grown over the last 12 months. So without these external factors disrupting things, which are impossible for people to predict, I do think this ecosystem is going to continue to grind higher.
And joining us now is Patrick Moorhead for more insights and strategy. And Pat, we could use more insights. So tell me, NVIDIA specifically, it was hit on China headlines in August and September, but it seemed to sort of take off from that. We're talking about all this open AI-driven demand. How much is this AI narrative exposed to China policy headlines?
John, I think this is a complete overreaction. Let's take NVIDIA as an example. NVIDIA zeroed out all revenue for China going forward. They just zeroed it out in all of their forecasts. But this is a left brain emotional reaction. I mean, listen, I understand companies like Apple, who quite frankly do most of their manufacturing in China and a little bit in India, but NVIDIA and even AMD in particular make absolutely no sense.
Well, how much of this might be about the optimism that it takes from businesses, global businesses, to keep fueling this massive investment cycle? I mean, you've got as good a perspective as anybody on how this lines up on previous technology infrastructure cycles. It's been a long time since we've seen anything close to it, right?
I mean, John, I've never seen anything like this. This even eclipses .com. I do think with the run-up of so many stocks in the ecosystem, whether it was cloud service providers, chip companies, and everybody in between, it's getting so hot that the market was looking for any reason to sell off. And I think they found it. And I also think we can't just dismiss the shutdown. I think all of this is risk, even though right brain, it doesn't make sense for tech. I would understand if we were going into a true trade war with Taiwan. Now that would be very, very difficult, where most of the leading edge chips that are used in hyperscalers are all made in Taiwan. But we're talking about China, that sure, they do manufacture smartphones and PCs, but not leading edge chips.
So in light of that, how does this set us up for earnings, and what are the names you like the best here?
So I do think in the AI trade will be quite strong. So I think it sets us up quite nicely. I think NVIDIA is going to do what they did before, which is do a beat and probably a meet on the forecast, and people will be disappointed in the forecast because it met, because of these absolutely stratospheric type of expectations out there. But I think when it comes to even the hyperscalers, I mean, they are on the move. And I think what was clear from OpenAI's Dev Day of the trillions of tokens that were being consumed out there, and the types of companies, a lot of startups, but you saw T-Mobile in there, you saw Salesforce in there, which I thought was quite interesting, which could be one of the canaries in the coal mine, and where we're talking about these downstream impacts here.
All right, I hope you're all doing well today and staying calm in this market. We have a lot to talk about as the trade tensions between the US and China are back in focus. But first, I want to mention that the Senate has passed the provision known as the GAIN AI Act. Now it goes to the House. The GAIN AI Act would require that US chip makers like NVIDIA prioritize shipments to US companies, and they can only export chips abroad after all domestic needs have been satisfied. While that may sound like a reasonable idea at first, I think it's actually a very dangerous strategic mistake on the United States' part. As I've previously explained, it is in the United States' best interest that developers around the world continue building on and continue to be dependent upon the American tech stack. If the GAIN AI Act is passed and signed into law, it would result in many developers around the world being unable to access NVIDIA's products. If that happens, those developers will look for alternatives to fill the gap, including alternatives that are not produced by US companies, including alternatives that are produced by Chinese companies. While the GAIN AI Act may have good intentions, it would result in American chip makers losing market share in markets around the globe, and it would open the door for companies like Huawei to step in and fill that gap. Please keep in mind that I'm politically independent and nothing I say is motivated by politics. Also, the Financial Times is reporting that Chinese regulators have intensified their enforcement of import restrictions on US chips, including those from NVIDIA. The Financial Times has done a great job accurately reporting on NVIDIA China rumors in recent months, and so this report is worth paying attention to. The market was fine and largely unfazed by the news I've described so far. But then the president made a post online, and that's when the market made a sharp move lower. The president said that China has become hostile and sent letters to countries around the world regarding new export restrictions on just about everything related to rare earths. The president said China wants to impose export controls related to rare earths and other products. The president said that his administration was calculating a massive increase of tariffs on Chinese products coming into the US, as well as considering many other countermeasures. That is what caused the market to trade sharply lower. And then later in the day after market close, the president posted again saying that effective November 1st, the US will impose a 100% tariff on China, as well as export controls on any and all critical software. That's what caused the market to trade lower again in after hours. Now, it's important to note that both Trump and Xi were scheduled to meet with each other in 2 weeks. I wonder if China's actions were an attempt to gain leverage ahead of that meeting. It would not surprise me if both China and the US were to eventually de-escalate the situation and we go back to normal. But even if that happens, I don't know when it will happen. Right now, we're dealing with more of the back and forth trade dispute between the US and China, and unfortunately, NVIDIA and the rest of the market is caught up in the middle of it. The good news for NVIDIA is that they have completely zeroed out China H20 revenue from their numbers. NVIDIA included zero China revenue in their Q3 guidance, meaning their business is accelerating even without any exposure to China. On a more positive note, MP Material stock was up nicely on the news. I continue to be bullish on MP over the next 5 to 10 years, as I've mentioned in previous videos. You can find those videos on the channel homepage if you want to know more. Also, iron reached a new all-time high today before pulling back sharply with the rest of the market. I continue to be bullish on iron over the next 1 to 2 years, and I encourage you to research iron. As I said in yesterday's video, if you invest in iron, it's important to have at least a basic understanding of the company so that you're not scared out of your position when the stock pulls back due to a lack of knowledge about the company. There's a video of iron's co-CEO posted on the channel homepage that can serve as a nice starting point if you want to know more about iron. Now back to NVIDIA. I continue to be bullish on NVIDIA long-term regardless of what happens with the China situation. And I continue to like the fundamental setup for NVIDIA through the remainder of this year and into 2026 due to multiple reasons. Certain sovereign AI deals should start to show up as revenue or revenue guidance on NVIDIA's Q3 or Q4 reports. I feel even more confident about saying that after the recent news that the UAE deal is moving forward. Also, Blackwell Ultra is ramping quickly, leading to revenue growth acceleration. And I'm expecting a surge in compute demand fueled by agentic AI that extends well into 2026. And beyond that, NVIDIA has multiple large growth opportunities that they are really just starting to capitalize on in a meaningful way. Sovereign AI, enterprise AI, which Jensen believes is an opportunity worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Many AI native startups, physical AI, and quantum computing. Many of these growth opportunities are not being adequately factored into most analysts' long-term estimates. And as for physical AI, NVIDIA sells the hardware for the data centers where the models are trained. They offer Omniverse where the models are taught and tested. And NVIDIA also sells the hardware that allows on-device real-time inference through NVIDIA AGX, allowing robots to have intelligent interactions with the real world even when they are not connected to a data center. We're no longer talking about AI agents that complete digital tasks. We're now talking about physical AI agents that complete physical tasks in the real world. This is going to transform the world as we know it, and NVIDIA stands to benefit massively. I am completely serious when I say that I think NVIDIA's physical AI business may eventually be larger than their current data center business. And I don't think this is getting enough attention right now. Looking ahead, we have NVIDIA GTC in Washington, D.C. later this month, with a keynote from Jensen Huang scheduled for October 28th. Be on the lookout for any sovereign AI initiatives with the U.S. government or large-scale projects with U.S. companies. I say this because Jensen usually announces large-scale projects that are unique to the region where the GTC event is held. And this event is being held in Washington, D.C. Jensen told us on NVIDIA's earnings call that he is anxious to share more details about Rubin with us at GTC. As for production ramps, Blackwell Ultra is ramping very quickly right now, leading to revenue growth acceleration. Rubin is on track to launch in 2026. Then we're expecting Rubin CPX at the end of 2026. Later on, we're expecting the launch of Rubin Ultra in 2027 and Feynman after that in 2028. We have a clear data center product roadmap stretching into 2028, and Jensen believes there will be $3 to $4 trillion of global AI factory buildout between now and 2030. That means Jensen is expecting growing AI demand and an expanding total addressable market underpinning all of this. I don't think we are anywhere near any type of bubble bursting type of event. With all of this in mind, I seriously think that NVIDIA still has plenty of runway ahead of it. And I think this company will be worth substantially more in future years than it is today. At least that's my view of the situation. Remember to stay calm in this market. Remember to maintain a long-term perspective and do not make any hasty or irrational decisions. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.